We continue with our rolling coverage on the U.S. election. Sherwin Bryce-Pease joins us live from New York for more. Sherwin, welcome again. We know that this election is a pretty close call, and the economy is one of the biggest issues in this election. What is at stake?
Yeah, the economy certainly among the top electoral issues in this election: border security, immigration, reproductive rights, abortion access, healthcare, and saving America's democracy. Those are the top issues, right? But it's difficult to get away from the economy, right? There was a famous statement made by a guy called James Carville, who was a special advisor to former President Bill Clinton in his 1992 race against George H.W. Bush. And he made the point back then that it's about the economy, stupid. And so general elections tend to be focused on the economy, but it's not the only issue that is driving voters to the polls. The Biden economy is essentially a strong economy. Inflation has come down to around 2.1%. The Federal Reserve's target is around 2%. The third quarter growth is around 2.8%. So things are trending in the right direction. The Federal Reserve is probably going to lower interest rates later this week. So things are shaping up for whomever becomes the 47th president of the United States. The question, Paul, is what issue is going to turn out the most voters? And that is an answer we certainly don't have at this point. We do know that Kamala Harris has made reproductive rights and access to abortion a key theme. We are seeing anecdotal data that points to women turning out more than men, certainly in the early vote, by a margin of 54% to 44%. Will that trend continue with in-person voting today? We don't have those kinds of answers, but the Democratic Kamala Harris campaign is certainly quietly confident. I just also wanted to share a few facts with you, right? A few firsts. Yeah. If she were to win, Kamala Harris that is, she would become the first woman in the 248-year history of the United States to become president and commander-in-chief. Trump, were he to win a second term here, essentially, right, he would become the oldest president ever to be inaugurated in the United States. Also, he would be the first defeated president in 132 years to win another term in the White House. So quite a few firsts in that regard. If he wins, he all but assures that he would also avoid going to prison, right? As you well know, Donald Trump faces a great deal of legal jeopardy were he not to win this election. Department of Justice rules dictate that a sitting president cannot then be pursued in the courts of law. So all the cases, all the legal jeopardy he faces would certainly go away. And then in terms of how this election is proceeding around the country, we have had certainly smooth operations, not too many problems at the polling station where we've been based now for a number of hours. But the FBI in Paul just a few moments ago posted the following message on social media platform X. It says this: the FBI is aware of bomb threats to polling locations in several states, many of which appear to originate from Russian email domains. None of the threats have been determined to be credible thus far. So certainly a response from the Federal Bureau of Investigation as it relates to certain bomb threats that have been experienced at locations around the country, pointing to Russian interference here. Of course, difficult for us to verify, but that's certainly the message we're getting from the authorities here in the United States.
What about then the concerns around the integrity of the election? What has been said with some of the perspectives that have been put to the forefront?
So what we know about the integrity of US elections is based on the 60 court cases that were brought by the Trump campaign and various allies of Donald Trump when he lost the election to Joe Biden in 2020. And what those court decisions tell us is that the election integrity in the United States is pretty secure. And so the aspersions that have been cast on the integrity of the elections in the various states, right, they're managed by the various states around the country, there is really no veracity to it. Donald Trump casting aspersions because the speculation is that were he to lose this election, that he would then, cry foul in terms of election integrity. But as we saw, for example, in the state of Georgia, right? You remember the telephone call that Donald Trump made to the Secretary of State after the election, saying that he needed to find so many votes. Georgia went through various checks, rechecks and recounts of the election. Arizona recounted multiple times, and they came back with an affirmation that the election worked and that the election integrity was secure. So there's not much to it, but it does rile up, the sensitivities. If Donald Trump is your candidate and you believe the things that he says, it's going to irritate you if you were to say that he's been cheated out of another election win here, as he's made the case in 2020. But there are armies of lawyers, we understand, in Paul, fanned out across all the swing states. One imagines there will be legal questions about, incidents that happened, and these will be poured over by competent people in courts of law.
So, bearing the sensitivities in mind, using that as the operative word here, how will we begin to assess what an outcome will mean to Americans? Win or lose for whichever candidate, what will that outcome mean?
What an outcome means in the United States presidential election is devastation for at least half of the country. That's essentially what the polls are telling us. It'll be exhilarating for the other half that will win. And so you're going to have this scenario where there are going to be very, very sad people in the United States and very, very happy people in the United States. And what that looks like, will probably take us back to 2016 when Donald Trump surprisingly beat Hillary Clinton. And, bastions like New York City or California were devastated that Donald Trump beat Hillary and prevented the historic nature of her candidacy back in 2016. So, this is the second bite of the cherry, if you will, in terms of Kamala Harris here seeking to make history. But a lot of questions around patriarchy and misogyny and, whether the United States is, quote unquote, ready for a woman president. And I often answer that question by saying, well, in 2016, Hillary Clinton won the popular vote by almost 3 million votes. So that tells you that a majority of people in the United States were ready for a woman president. It was the Electoral College that in many ways stood in her way. So, there's going to be a lot of sadness and devastation, and depending on what the principals do in that moment, will they concede if they lose? Will they accept the outcome of the result? And how will they encourage their supporters to behave? That becomes catalytic about what happens next. What we are seeing is a heightened alert from law enforcement, the security apparatus around the United States. We've seen some states like Nevada and Washington State out west having the National Guard on standby out of an abundance of caution. So all the permutations are being considered. We simply just don't know how this result is going to go. I do believe that if Donald Trump were to win, we're unlikely to see much violence. Kamala Harris is probably going to accept the result. She has said she will do that. Donald Trump today, for the first time after voting down in Florida, saying that he would be the first to accept the result if it was free and fair. Only problem is the last one was free and fair too, and he didn't accept that.